mountain, as you can see, and we're heading out.
It makes quite a tremendous noise. I mean, it sounds like the roaring of a train, and you know you better get out of the way quick.
As I was going through our gate down here, I looked up there and the fire was coming over the ridge. It was minutes. It was maybe 7 or 10 minutes. It was just so crazy because I really didn't think our house was going to burn. I really thought, oh, we're going to come back, we're going to wash the soot off the walls and, you know, water everything good, and we're going to have a house left.
The house, basically, the fire was so hot it didn't burn to the ground, it burned below the ground. So when we came up Saturday morning, there was just nothing but flames still burning inside the house and a lot of smoldering rubble, and that was about it.
I built this cabin from scratch myself with my own 2 hands. It's gone, and I don't have the time in my life to rebuild. I'm in my 60s now. Right now we're living in a tent, cleaning up the property, burning flash. I had some really good timber on this place. I had timber that dated before Lewis and Clark made their journey. I'll never see it, and my granddaughter will never see it, and her granddaughter will never see it. It's going to take another 200 to 300 years to get this back to the way it was.
About 40 acres out of hundreds and hundreds of trees, you might have 50 or 75 that might survive it. Out of 40 acres, you're looking at what's left. Now it's nothing but a stump patch.
I'd say we lost right at a little bit better than 3/4 of our timber that was on here. Merchantable timber. We lost everything but the house.
Everything but the house.
Yeah.
Every day is a constant reminder of the horror. This was my dream home. Now it's a nightmare.
By the end of the 12th, that first night, as it got dark, feeling pretty good about this fire. You know, they had a good line around it, the hose lay in, so the hand crew had camped out the night before, so they went home, if I remember right, and then came back the next morning. They got back around the fire and everything was still looking really good, so they just went back to work. And then at about 2:30 or so in the afternoon, they did pick up a spot fire out here about 400 feet up the hill, and then the winds were picking up at the same time, and so it took off running pretty quick.
So the fire started in this kind of this little drainage that drains down into Deer Creek. Fairly benign, started off as a single smoke, and that same morning, or later on that morning, I guess I should say, is when the Forest Service brought in their smoke jumpers and helitack crews. If it was a small fire, seems like you could do a pretty good job if you stayed on it. I think letting it get away and not being able to initially do as much as perhaps was warranted or needed kind of allowed it to kind of get out of control. But I think you had a lot of variables in there. I don't recall a lot of wind that morning, but the winds did kick up substantially that afternoon.
Spot fire definitely got into this little thicker timber here, a total crown fire in the ponderosa pine, just throwing spots out ahead of itself. By that time, the dozer's coming back in trying to get an anchor, and the aircraft are back over it at that point for sure, and you know, they're seeing spot fires beyond what they're already trying to work on. So at that point, I think they knew this one was lost. And I think by the end of that day, we estimated about 500 acres. You know, nightfall did come and slowed it down a little. Had a lot of fire at that point.
I'm not blaming the Forest Service. We don't blame the Coast Guard for a hurricane. I do believe that at a national level, policies could have been addressed early on to deal with this thing, to be more proactive in dealing with these potential fires. Some type of management needs to be applied to wilderness grounds, thinning it, creating buffers, and doing things like private landowners have been doing for years. That money be well spent in advance of a fire. Or if we're not going to do that, at least have a national firefighting crew that addresses it year-round, that's prepared to fight it, so we're not reactive but proactive. Something.
They called it the perfect storm, and I think that's probably
The conditions
a little
were
bit misused,
perfect.
but yeah.
Must have been sometime Thursday I made a comment to you, Bob, that, oh, it looks like it's getting under control, looks pretty good. That afternoon, we're out on the deck and it's building up again.
When we left, 35-mile-an-hour sustained winds, there were gusts to 49. If the winds hadn't come up, I think we stood a good chance that, that they would have been able to do something.
With that wind, it was just too much.
Forest Service did everything I believe they could do with the resources they had. There was just no way you were going to hold that fire, and then once it got going, stop it. It was just, it was act of God.
The lack of cleaning this forest up over the last 30 years and the lack of them fighting fire and putting fires out is not an act of God, it's an act of man.
They just don't aggressively pursue fires anymore. They let them burn, and it becomes a big party. People selling t-shirts. Canyon Creek Complex fire, and it's got pictures of flames. Make a profit off of people's losses, like it's a rock concert.
We were just extremely fortunate that everybody got out. So
Nobody was hurt.
none of the firefighters were. There was no loss of life, and that was it. That was the biggie.
I would have felt awful to know that someone died trying to save our house.
This summer just started adding up to the perfect storm, which to me, once again, to take people off the fire was inexcusable. Predictable is preventable. This fire was predicted.
Yeah.
They could have stopped it.